Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here today. And my goal for you today is that when you walk out the door, you will know at least a little bit more about the overall Cook County property tax system, and you'll know a lot more about how to put together a successful appeal at the Cook County Board of Review. I want to let you know that my office is a separate office from the Cook County Assessor. So there's the Cook County Assessor, Joe Barrios. That office is responsible for assessing all property in Cook County. They do have an appeal opportunity. If you get an assessment that you think is unfair, you can appeal to the assessor. However, that's not their main responsibility. Their main responsibility is assessing property. Our responsibility is to receive appeals from property owners, whether it's residential, commercial, industrial, or vacant land, review the evidence that's presented to us and that we have at our disposal, and determine whether or not the assessment is correct or whether or not it should be reduced. So our office is at 118 North Clark Street. We are on the 6th floor. The Cook County Assessor is on the 3rd floor and the 9th floor, so two separate offices. If you previously appealed to the Cook County Assessor and were successful and you want to still appeal to the Board of Review, that's fine. Or if you appeal to the assessor and you were unsuccessful, you can still come to us and we're going to look at everything brand new with an open mind. And if you didn't go to the assessor at all, that's fine. You don't have to go to the assessor to come to the Board of Review. The time for appealing at the assessor always comes before the time for appealing at the Board of Review. So Patty mentioned that there's always this question from people regarding their property value, and recently, back in 2007, we had a recession. Values went down, but property taxes kept on going up, and a lot of people wondered, well, why is that? Because, of course, we're all accustomed to steadily rising property values. I grew up in Skokie. My parents bought their house in 1965 for $21,000, and in 1985 they sold it for $75,000. They felt they made a killing. And that house and most other houses have gone up steadily, and of course taxes have gone up since that time steadily. So a lot of people have the expectation that, well, now my value's gone way down, that the taxes should go down as well, and that's not the way it works. So in past years when we've done these seminars, we've done many of them, I always addressed that question, but my answer usually took about 20 minutes. And I've been told by my staff that 20 minutes is too long when you add it on top of the presentation for the actual appeal filing. So we've created a 5-minute video. We hope you will enjoy it. It will be informative, and then we're going to go ahead with the rest of the presentation. So Maggie, if you can come and get this thing started, we can take a look.
I've lived in my home for 20 years. With the recent recession, the value of my home has decreased considerably. Why do my property taxes go up when the value of my home goes down?
Schools may account for over 60% of your property tax bill. The library, park district, local township, Cook County government, water reclamation district are some of the other taxing bodies that you pay. Each year, these taxing bodies have a levy meeting where they decide how much money they'll need for future operations. By law, the levy can only be raised 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. Typically, the average increase is in the neighborhood of 3%. Let's say the high school board believes the levy increase won't be enough to cover the cost of new computers for the student library, and determine an extra 8% levy is needed.
A referendum is a request for additional money that is over and above what is allowed to ask by law. So the high school's request for additional money is placed on the ballot during an election for the public to vote on. You may say, okay, they passed the referendum. We pay an extra 11% that year. But it's not just an extra 11% that year. It's an extra 11% going forward. Because once it's raised at the 11%, the following year when the high school has its levy meeting, they may raise it another 3%. It's 3% on top of the 11%. So what you have is a steadily rising demand for taxes, and that demand has to be met. And in most cases, the same property owners from one year to the next having to meet that demand. So you can see how you can end up paying more even when the value of the property is going down.
Let's talk about the second reason why taxes go up when your property value goes down. There are 102 counties in Illinois. All counties, except for Cook, assess residential and commercial property at the same rate. In Cook County, residential property is assessed 10% of value, and commercial property is assessed at 25% value. Businesses pay 2.5 times more than residents. When a business closes, who pays the gap in revenue? When a business on a large property, responsible for millions in taxes, closes its doors, you've got a lot less revenue because the vacant building's assessment is reduced significantly. Therefore, everybody, residents and other business owners alike, have to fill the gap left by vacant properties. Here is the third reason your tax bill may have increased. If you received an exemption one year, but didn't receive it the next, you can end up paying more. Check your second installment bill in July to confirm. If you are not receiving exemptions you are entitled to, such as homeowners or the senior exemption, call the Cook County Assessor's Office. You can file a certificate of error to receive a refund.
I hope you found this explanation on why your property taxes go up when the value of your home goes down helpful. It's important to keep in mind the taxing bodies will get what they are asking for. Revenue must be met. If your taxes go down, someone else's will go up to meet revenue demand. I know no one likes hearing it, but at least you know a little bit more about why things are happening.
Okay, so I hope that was a little bit enlightening. So in any case, you know, over the years I've done a lot of these seminars. As a matter of fact, when I was a staffer for a previous commissioner, Maureen Murphy, she did a lot of seminars. She did so many that she really couldn't do them all herself, and she asked her staff to fill in from time to time, and I was one of the people that ended up helping out. I probably did about 60 of these for her over about an 8-year period. I've done a lot more than that since I was elected about 4 years ago. But in any case, when I was working for Maureen, what I started hearing were the same questions over and over again. So I started committing them to paper. And so I'm going to try to answer your questions before you ask them. And then when we're all done, if your questions are not answered, I will stand up here and try to take your questions and give you the best answer that I can. For everyone's information, this is being taped. They've got some cameras in the room, and as you can see, I'm mic'd up. Just want to make you aware of that. So anyways, the first question is, why should I appeal? And there's a variety of reasons for that. Reason number one, it doesn't cost anything. You can file appeal at the Board of Review. There's no charge. The only cost to you is whatever effort you might put in to gather the information to convince us at the Board of Review that in fact you're overassessed. Now, Patty mentioned that many of us, and this includes me, have received letters in the mail from many different attorneys saying that they can get your assessment reduced. So if you want to hire an attorney to represent you, there are attorneys that do this for a living, and generally speaking, they know what they're doing, they're good at their job. it's your absolute right to hire an attorney to represent you. Of course, if you do that, the attorney is going to ask you to pay them, more than likely. So that would be a cost. Otherwise, if you do it yourself, no cost. And what I would say is, since you are here tonight listening to me talk, by the time you leave, you're probably going to have a much better feel for being able to do this on your own. And of course, you can always get help from Patty's office. That's what they're here for. So unless you have a terribly complex case, there's probably no need to hire an attorney. Reason number 2 to appeal is you have a good chance for success. When I first started at the Board of Review in 1999, the success rate that year was 54%. Now, and that means the percentage of appeals that actually received a reduction. Now, some of them were small reductions and some of them were large, but 54%, not bad. That number varies from year to year. Last year at the board, the success rate was 62%. So, not a bad success rate. And again, because you're here, you're hearing from me on how to do this, I think it gives you a better chance than the average taxpayer who might file on their own without the help of an attorney, who probably isn't going to know as much as you'll know when you leave this room. Reason number 3, you have a chance for multi-year savings. I was talking to a gentleman here earlier, and I don't see him, but he asked me about assessments and how often you're reassessed. Well, the Cook County assessor reassesses 1/3 of Cook County every 3 years. The northern suburbs were reassessed in 2013. So now we're in 2014. It's the second year of the triennial reassessment period. So if you had filed an appeal with the Board of Review last year in 2013 and received a reduction, in about 99% of the cases, that reduction would stick, not only for 2013, but also 14 and 15, so you would get 3 years' worth of savings. If you file an appeal this year and you're successful, you'll receive a reduction for 2014, but that reduction will stay also for 2015. And again, I say in 99% of the cases, there are some unique cases where the Cook County assessor has a significant difference of opinion with us at the Board of Review, and after the first year's reduction, they may jack the assessment back up, but I would say that is less than 1% of the time. So chance for multi-year savings is another reason for appeal. And by the way, if you receive a reduction this year from us at the board, of course that's good for 2 years in most cases, but if you decide next year that you're still overassessed, you can file an appeal again, and if you provide the proper evidence, you can get an additional reduction from the Board of Review. So you can appeal to the board once every year. You can also appeal to the Cook County assessor once every year. All right, last reason for appeal, let's say that you are convinced you're overassessed. You do your homework, you gather your evidence, you look at the evidence, say, "Boy, this is overwhelming, it cannot be denied." You send it into us at the Board of Review, and when we review it, we determine that you are not overassessed, you're confused. And in fact, you're underassessed. We will not raise your assessment. So you don't have to worry about something bad happening at the Board of Review when you file an appeal. Nothing bad is going to happen. The worst thing that can happen is that we'll leave your assessment where it currently is. And by the way, this counts for if you provide a comparable property to justify a reduction for your home, and it's from a neighbor or a friend, and we determine that that property is underassessed, we're not going to raise that one either. So you don't have to worry about getting either yourself or anybody else in trouble. So anyways, there's 4 reasons to appeal. I hope that's good enough for you. Now, next question is, how do I know if I'm overassessed? There are a variety of reasons why someone might file an appeal at the Board of Review. The number one reason for residential property owners that file at the Board of Review is called lack of uniformity. All that really means is that your house, compared to other similar homes, is assessed higher. So that's the number one reason. I'm going to give you a detailed explanation on how to put together a lack of uniformity case. But before I do that, I'm going to go through some other reasons why you might appeal. Then I'm going to circle back around and give you that one, okay? So the next reason for appeal, recent purchase. If you purchased your home in the last 3 years, for our purposes that means since January 1st of 2011, and it was an arm's length transaction, meaning that it was not a sale between relatives, not a short sale, and not a foreclosure. Arm's length transaction. If it was that, we will use the purchase price to help us determine what the assessment ought to be. So let me give you an example of how that would work. Let's say that your house right now is assessed at $30,000. You bought it last year for $250,000. We will apply the statutory assessment rate for residential property, which is 10%, to your purchase price. So 10% of $250,000 is $25,000. And we will say that your assessment ought to be $25,000. So it'll go from $30,000 down to $25,000. Now, if you bought that same house for $400,000, we're not going to raise you from the $30,000 up to $40,000. We won't do that. We will not use the purchase price against you. We'll only use it to reduce your assessment if in fact that's the situation. Of course, if you bought it for $400,000, you wouldn't use that for a reason to appeal in any case. But if your situation allows that you would get a reduction from the purchase price, the evidence that we need is your closing statement, because the closing statement has the name of the buyer and the seller, the purchase price, and the date of sale. Please also give us an affidavit saying that this is an arm's length transaction, not a short sale, not a foreclosure, not between relatives, and sign it. You don't need to have it notarized, but just write us a note testifying to that fact. Okay? All right, so next reason for appeal is market value. So the Cook County assessor puts a market value on every property in Cook County. If you believe that the market value placed on your property is higher than the real market value of the property, you could file a market value appeal. However, you have to give us evidence and show us that, in fact, the market value isn't what the assessor says. It's some lower amount that you say it is. So what would be good evidence for that? Well, an appraisal could be good evidence. We'd like something within the last couple of years. The more recent, the better, to establish value. We would consider that expert testimony. I will tell you, we won't necessarily embrace the number that's on the appraisal. We may. But we're going to evaluate the appraisal. We're going to look at the comparables that the appraiser used. We're going to look at the adjustments that the appraiser made on those comparables compared to your home. And if we think he did a good job, we'll adopt that number that he put on there. If we think that he was off a little bit, we may adjust that number. If we think he did a terrible job, we may not use that at all. Other evidence you can use is provide us with data on recent sales of homes like yours in your neighborhood. So where can you get that data? I'll give you two good places. Place number one, your local realtor. Local realtor belongs to the multiple listing service. They can pull up comparable properties that have sold over the last few years that are like yours, that are in your area. Usually they'll be able to produce a photograph with a description of the property. Usually they'll tell you whether it was a short sale or a foreclosure. Now on market value appeals, we will consider recent sales that are foreclosures or short sales. However, we give much more weight to arm's length transactions. So, just as a rule of thumb, if you're going to give us 10 comparable properties, give us 7 at least that are arm's length transactions. If you want to throw in a few that are a short sale or foreclosure, you can. We will consider them. However, as I say, we'll give them less weight than the arm's length transactions. The other place you can go is to your local township assessor, Patty Damish. Patty, can you tell us where your office is and your office hours? And Patty, just for our viewers at home, that was 2550 Waukegan Road in Glenview, okay? And the hours are 8:30 to 4:30, except Thursdays till 7 p.m. So in any case, Patty's got a very good database, and that database contains sales data for homes going back many years. And the advantage of going to Patty's office rather than a realtor is that Patty's got information on all sales of all properties. The realtors only have the ones that are sold by other realtors that are on the multiple listing service. So the realtors probably have 90% of the sales, but Patty has the other 10%. One thing she doesn't have, her data is probably in arrears by about 3 or 4 months, because she gets her data from the Recorder of Deeds, and that's how long it takes the Recorder of Deeds to send that over to Patty's office. So market value is the third way. Fourth, an error in the description of your property. The Cook County Assessor has all kinds of information about your property. The number of bedrooms and bathrooms. Do you have a garage? Is it a 1-car or a 2-car? Is it attached or detached? Is there a side drive? Do you have a basement? Is it finished or unfinished? Partial or full? Are you sitting on a slab or a crawl space? What's the construction style, the age, the type of roof? Do you have a fireplace and an air conditioning? All kinds of data on your home. Occasionally, the assessor has an error in the description of your home. For our purposes at the Board of Review, the most important error that the Cook County Assessor can make in the description of your property is in the living square footage of your home. Now, the reason for that, if your house is 1,000 square feet, but the assessor says that it's 1,500 square feet, that means that you're probably paying about 50% more on the building portion of your assessment than you ought to be paying. And it's very important that you get that corrected. So you can come to us at the Board of Review, and you can let us know that the square footage is off, and we can make an adjustment in your assessment based on the error in the square footage. Now, the information that the assessor has on file still needs to get changed, and while we will send whatever we have to the assessor's office, and hopefully they'll follow up and change their records so that the error ends in the next year, you don't go back up again, it's your responsibility to follow up with the assessor and make sure that that change was made. Now, as far as the evidence that you need to give us, there's a variety of different things that you can use, sort of depending on the type of house you have. A plata survey can be very good evidence. If you have a simple 1-story home, we can look at the plata survey. It's a bird's eye view. We could say length times width equals living square footage. If it's a simple 2-story, we say length times width times 2 gives us the living square footage. A lot of homes aren't simple. A lot of them have many twists and turns, different shaped roofs, which will change the total square footage. If that's the case, a plata survey by itself won't be enough. So if you have an appraisal of the house, we consider that very good information, because an appraisal will always say the living square footage of the home, and usually it'll have drawings of the exterior dimensions of the home, so we can look at those and verify what the assessor came up with. If you can get a letter from a certified state licensed architect who has inspected and measured your home, testifying to what the real square footage is, on his letterhead with his state seal, we would consider that to be expert testimony. If you have architect's drawings which are legible and easy to read, we can use that as evidence. You may want to take photos of your house to help us figure out the square footage. Sometimes we can't tell maybe where the garage ends and the house starts, or other areas that may not count as living square footage but may begin or start, and photographs can help us. As far as how you measure living square footage, let me just tell you how to do it. First, basically, it's from the outside dimensions. It includes the walls, the hallways, the closets, the bathrooms, and all the regular rooms. But let me tell you also what it doesn't count. A basement does not count as living square footage, even if the basement is finished, even if there's a bedroom and a bathroom. If you live in a bi-level style house with a lower level family room, you go down 5 steps and you have that lower level family room does not count as living square footage. If you have an unfinished, unheated attic, not part of living square footage. If you have a 3-season room built onto the back of your house, use it in the spring, summer, and fall, but it's not heated, you don't use it in the wintertime, not part of living square footage. And if you have a colonial style home, usually it's colonial, the kind where you walk in and you've got a large foyer, maybe it's 15 feet by 10 feet, 150 square feet, right? But you look up and you've got a ceiling like this. In other words, the ceiling goes up to the second story. There is no second story above that foyer. It's called a two-story foyer, right? It's 150 square feet on this level, but it's really no square feet on the next level because there is no real next level for that foyer. That shouldn't count as living square footage. And if you've got a living room or a family room that has that's like that two-story foyer, that shouldn't be counted either. Occasionally, because maybe the assessor might do a field check from the outside of the house, they might not know that you've got a two-story foyer or other room. And if that's the case, you might want to check and make sure that the assessor's got their information correct. Last reason for appeal, vacancy. Let's say something happens to your house, like you have a fire. And as a result, you are forced out of the house while you settle with the insurance company and you get contractors in to fix the place up. You can get what's called a vacancy for the time period that you're out of the house. It would be a vacancy on the building portion of your assessment. So what would be good evidence for that? Well, a fire marshal's report, that's good evidence. Insurance paperwork, that's good evidence. Photographs of the inside and outside damage to the house, good evidence. An affidavit from you explaining what happened and, why you had to be out of the house and when you were able to return. An affidavit from one of your neighbors testifying to the fact that they know you had a fire and that you weren't living in the house for a certain period of time. If the village pulled your occupancy permit and said you can't live in the house, it's unlivable, you got that letter, and then if you can potentially give us a subsequent letter saying we're restoring your occupancy permit, that makes it real easy for us. They had to be out on this date, per the village order, they were able to return on this date. You get a vacancy for that period of time. I want to suggest that you when you're sending us evidence, give us as much as you can, and use your common sense. And you need to do this for square footage as well. Say to yourself, the person that's going to review my file, actually the persons, there's several people, the people that will look at my file, they will never see my house, and if I don't come for a hearing, they're never going to talk to me about it. So all they have to go on is whatever I submit. So use your common sense. Is this going to be enough to pass the common sense test to convince someone that in fact either you're out of the house or that the square footage is incorrect? Okay? All right, now let's circle back around. I said I'd talk about a lack of uniformity appeal. Let's talk about what we mean at the Board of Review by uniformity. We're looking at about 5 or 6 major things. The first thing is property classification. All residential property is Class 2. But within Class 2, there are subclassifications. Class 202, 203, 204, 234 is a bi-level, so on and so forth. Your house falls into one of those classifications, okay? So when you're comparing your home to other similar homes, compare your home to a home in the same classification. If you've got a 234, compare to other 234s. If you've got a 202, compare to other Class 202 homes. Next is neighborhood. Every 3 years when the Cook County Assessor reassesses property, he also draws neighborhoods within every township. And the neighborhoods are not the type of neighborhood we're all accustomed to. It's not a neighborhood that's associated with a church parish or a school or a park. It's simply a geographic area where the assessor considers the housing to be homogeneous. So a neighborhood could be several blocks long and wide, or it could be several miles long and wide. Every neighborhood is assigned a number. It could be number 2, number 28, number 49, number 112. Whatever it is, there's a number assigned to every neighborhood. Whatever neighborhood you're in, we want you to give us comparable properties that are also in that neighborhood. The only exception being if you have such a unique home that there are no other homes in the neighborhood that are like yours, then you can go outside your neighborhood and go to the next nearest neighborhood or the next neighborhood that is most like yours. Of course, you want to let us know that you did an exhaustive search, you couldn't find any other houses like yours, and you might want to tell us about why your house is so unique. and then we can proceed from there. That is a rarity, but if you're one of those people, you should know. Next is construction style. As far as the assessor is concerned, there are 4 types of construction. There's brick, which is the same as masonry. There's brick and frame. There's frame. And there's stucco. Your house falls into one of those categories. To the best of your ability, compare your home to other homes of the same construction style. Now, we understand that when you're staying within your same property classification and then within the same neighborhood, that may narrow your choices. So if it turns out that there's a house just like yours down the block, but yours is brick and that house is brick and frame, you can give that to us as a comparable. We may make an adjustment on our end because it's partially frame and not all brick, but we will certainly consider it as a comparable. However, I would say as a rule of thumb, if you can find good comparables that are of the same construction style, that's better than good comparables that are of a different construction style. Next, age. If you got a 50-year-old home, compare to other 50-year-old homes. If you can't find other 50-year-old homes, then compare to 40-year-old homes or 60-year-old homes. But please don't compare your 50-year-old home to a home that's 110 years old or a home that's 10 years old. That's not very similar at all. That's not uniform. So the general rule is stay as close as you can in age as you're able to while still giving us comparable properties that would justify your claim that you're over-assessed. Next is square footage. Now, the most common property classification of a property in Cook County is Class 203. The definition of a Class 203 is between 1,000 and 1,800 square feet, less than 2 stories. And when I say less than 2 stories, that could include a house that has a roof like this. This is what I grew up in. I grew up in a Cape Cod, right? So the assessor might count this house as 1.5 stories. So, you know, if it was between 1,000 and 1,800 square feet, this might be considered a Class 203. In any case, when giving us comparables, if your house is 1,100 square feet, we would like you to try to give us comparable properties that are also 1,100 square feet, or 1,000, or 1,200. As close in square footage as you can make it. Now, there may be comparables that are 1,700 or 1,800 square feet within the same classification. You can certainly turn those in as comparable properties. However, we're going to give more weight to those properties that are closer in square footage rather than those that are farther away in square footage. And the same thing goes for proximity. I mentioned that we want you to stay in the same neighborhood code. But a neighborhood could be a mile or 2 wide. And so that means you could give us a comparable property that's a mile away. However, we'd much rather have you give us comparable properties that are on the same block or across the street or 1 or 2 or 3 blocks away rather than something that's a mile away. So again, if you give us comparables that are close, we're going to give them more weight than comparables that are far away. Lastly, every once in a while we get files in with evidence, and someone will have looked up homes that are like theirs, but their house has a 2.5 car attached garage. And all the houses, comparables they turn in, don't have any garage at all. Well, we know that a 2.5 car garage adds significant value to a home. And so we know that if those homes that are turned in are assessed a little bit less than the subject property, your house that you're appealing, that's probably appropriate. They should be assessed lower. So if you've got a garage, try to give us comparables that also have a garage. And the more similar the garage, the better. But you know, if you've got a 2.5 car attached garage and all you can find is comparable homes that have 2 car garages, that's fine, but do your best on that. Same thing with the basement. Sometimes people will find homes that are like theirs, and their house has a full basement, but the homes that they find to compare are sitting on a slab. Well, we know that a basement adds value, okay? So try to give us homes that also have basements if you possibly can. So that's what we're looking at mainly when we're talking about uniformity. So the next question is, how do I know if my house is assessed higher or lower than another house? I'm going to give you a formula, and this formula is in the handout that you all got. So if you don't want to write it down, that's fine because it's already written down for you. But let's say that you own a Class 203 home. Let's say that that house is 1,500 square feet. Let's also say that the total assessment on that house is $25,000. The assessment's broken down into two parts, the land and the building, all right? Let's say that the land is $10,000, the building is $15,000. You want to figure out the assessment per square foot of living area of your home. Now, this is for a lack of uniformity complaint on the building, not the land. About 98% of our lack of uniformity appeals are based on the building, not the land. The assessor tends to do a pretty good job on land, not as good on the building. So in any case, in our example, your building assessment's $15,000, your building square footage is $1,500. To figure out the assessment per square foot of living area, you divide the building assessment, $15,000, by the building square footage, $1,500. What do you come out with? What's the answer? 15,000 divided by 1,500. Say it. You said it. 10? 10. Right. $10 a square foot. So if that's your house, you're at $10 a square foot. So what you want to find out is, what's everybody else at that has a house like mine? If you do your research and you find out that the other houses are at $9.50 and $10 and $10.50 and $11, $11.50 and $12, you're probably pretty fairly assessed. But if you find a pattern of homes that are at $9 and $8 and $7 and $6 a square foot, then you know you've got good evidence to come to the Board of Review and claim that you're overassessed. So next question is, where do I get this information from? I'm going to give you two places to go. The first place is my favorite place. It's in the room in your house that has a computer. Because you can go to the Cook County Assessor's database, cookcountyassessor.com, and you can get lots of great information. He's got a very good database, and I want to encourage everyone here, if you're interested in property taxes and learning how they work, go to the assessor's website, and he's got information about exemptions. And by the way, the Cook County Assessor administers all exemptions. That's where you apply to get your senior exemption, your senior freeze, your homeowner exemption, all that stuff. You could actually look on that website to see if you've been getting your exemptions by putting in your property index number. It'll show you the history of your house with exemptions. But in any case, one of the things it also has is a database. That database contains information on all 1.8 million parcels of property in Cook County. It has a description of every property. It has a photograph of every property, including your house. Okay? And you can go into that database and you can pull up the information on your house and you can pull up the information on other houses. And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. If by chance you don't have a computer, you're not comfortable with computers, you're not comfortable using a database or doing a search query, there's another really good place to go to. It's my second favorite place, no offense, Patty, but it's at Patty's office. Patty's got a really good database that all the township assessors have, or most of them have, and I had it at my office when I was in Wheeling Township. It's not the same database that the assessor has, but it has the same information. And actually, I think in a lot of ways, it's a better database than the assessor because they can really pick out information very quickly and in a very detailed way based on what they're looking for. And for instance, what they can do is you go in there with, preferably you go in with your PIN number, although they can look it up by your address as well, but PIN number makes it easier on them. They can print out every property of your classification in your neighborhood, and when they print them out, it'll have the assessment per square foot for every property. And they'll have them in order. They'll have the ones that are assessed highest, all the way down to the ones that are assessed lowest. It'll have your house in there. And if it turns out, as you look at this list, and the list may have 20 houses on it, or it may have 120 houses on that list, if it turns out that there's 100 houses on the list, but only 10 are assessed higher than you, and 90 are lower, you're probably doing pretty good. On the other hand, if there's 90 houses that are assessed lower than you, and only 10 that are higher, you can say, well, I'm really not quite in the middle there. I should probably move forward with my appeal, and I can use some of these homes as comparables. So on your own computer, or at Patty's office, and just so you know, the people at Patty's office help people file appeals all the time. They know what they're doing. They have this great database system, and if you go in there and you just ask them for a little bit of help, they'll give you a little help. If you go and you tell them, I'm completely lost, I have no idea how to do this, even though I went to the seminar, can you please do this for me? They'll do it for you. Okay? So you've got someone who's an expert who can help you, during the hours that I mentioned. Okay, so going back to doing it yourself, though, and I would really like it if you could all do it yourselves, because that's why I'm doing these seminars, to empower taxpayers so that you don't have to depend on the government to do things for you. You can do it yourself, and you can have the ability to sort of control your own destiny. So if you go to the assessor's database, what you can do is you can do a query. And there's a variety of different queries you can do, but for instance, you can say, give me all the houses in Northfield Township that are class 234 in neighborhood number 28, and it'll spit them all out. And on your screen, it'll have one line for each. It'll have an address, a PIN number, the total assessment, the classification, and I assume you'll know the addresses in your area. My suggestion is start clicking on the ones that are sort of close to you, get the full information, see if the house is similar to yours, if it's close in square footage and age and so forth, and then do that calculation that I told you about, if it looks like a good comparable, and see if it's assessed higher or lower per square foot of living area than your house. And the idea, of course, is to find homes that are assessed lower per square foot. I would print out my property first, all right? Do that calculation, and I would suggest that in the first page, which has the description of your property, there's some white space there. Write down the assessment per square foot of your property and circle it, okay? At the very top of the page, along the top, there's probably half an inch or an inch of white space. Write subject property. That's the property that you're appealing. It's your house, okay? When you pull up other comparables and the ones that you decide to use, do the same thing. In the white space, write the assessment per square foot and circle it. And then at the very top, for the first comparable, write comparable number 1. For the second comparable, comparable number 2, comparable number 3, so on and so forth. I would suggest giving us no fewer than 3 comparable properties. You probably don't need to give us more than 5. You can give us as many as you want. So if you think you've got 6, 7, or 8 that are really, really good, feel free to go ahead and give them to us. But 5 is probably sufficient. Once you've got those together, take the subject property, put it on the top of your stack, take the comparable properties, put them in ascending order, staple it in the upper left-hand corner. Then if there's anything else you want to add, if you want to tell us your story, if you want to describe the evidence that you've gathered for us, feel free to do that. Just write us a note. You type it up or you can handwrite it if you want to. And just a simple example, if you want to describe the property, describe the comparables, you could say, Dear Commissioners at the Board of Review, please reduce my assessment based on the 5 comparable properties. All of the properties are of the same classification as the subject property. All of them are in the same assessor's neighborhood within 3 blocks of the subject property, with comparable number 1 being on the same block as the subject property and comparable number 2 being right across the street from the subject property. All of the comparable properties are within 300 square feet in living space of the subject property, with comparable number 4 being the exact same square footage. Comparable number 5 being only 50 square feet larger. Comparable number 3 being only 50 square feet smaller. All of the properties being of the same construction style. All of the properties being within 10 years of age as the subject property, with comparables numbers 1 and 2 being the exact same age as the subject property. And you can continue talking about similarities beyond that if you want to. Then you might finish off by saying, while the subject property is assessed at $10 a square foot, the comparable properties are assessed at between $6 and $9 a square foot. Please reduce my assessment accordingly. Or, if you want to pick out one particular comparable that you think is most similar to your home and ask that your home's assessment be brought down to what that one is, you can do that. Totally up to you. And that can be your case. Of course, if there's something else you want to add, feel free to do it. If you go to Patty's office, they'll print all this stuff off for you automatically. We do like photographs, if you can possibly provide them, and that is usually page 2 or 3 when you pull up the information on your property, okay? So next question is, when do I file my appeal, and when do I turn in my evidence? As far as filing your appeal, can I borrow this sheet here from you for a second? Thank you. Everybody should have received one of these forms when they walked in, okay? This is your complaint form, all right? If you decide to file a complaint on paper, this is what you'd fill out, and I would suggest that you fill this out this evening, and you can turn it in to me at the end of the evening, either directly to me or one of my staff members. We will take this filled out form, we'll bring it downtown, we'll timestamp it in, and then we will enter it into our database and get you into the system and get you basically your place in line at the Board of Review for your appeal. Just a couple of things about this form. On the right-hand side here, there are lines. This is where you put your property index number. Some residential property owners might have 2 or 3 PIN numbers. If you do, just use the second line for the second PIN number and the third line for the third PIN number. The reason we have so many lines here is because this form is also used for commercial industrial property, and a lot of those may have 10, 20, 30 property index numbers. There's also a line here in red. It says, I request a hearing before the Cook County Board of Review. Okay? If you want to have a hearing with us, check this box. You will eventually get a letter in the mail informing you of the date and time of the hearing, and you would need to come downtown to our office, 118 North Clark Street on the 6th floor, and you can come and talk to the analyst or one of the analysts who is going to be reviewing your file, and you can tell him your story, explain to him the evidence you have. My suggestion is, if you're doing a simple lack of uniformity appeal, you probably don't need to come for a hearing. If you've got something more complex, I would suggest that you do ask for a hearing. And I would say that the acid test on that is, if you think that whatever it is you want to communicate can be adequately communicated in writing, then you don't need a hearing. But if you think it's something where you need to explain the evidence, maybe it's a square footage problem where you've got architect's drawings and you want to show what the architect's drawings are really saying, or whatever the situation is, come for a hearing, and you can talk to someone directly, and they can see you face to face and so forth. So that's one way to file your appeal. The deadline for filing the appeal is November 21st. Please, you must get your appeal in by November 21st. If you do it on the 22nd, it will be too late. That's why I'm telling everybody, if you're going to do it, and you're going to do it on paper, fill out the form tonight, give it to us, that way it'll be in on time. Now, there's another way to file an appeal, and it's actually one that I prefer, and that's doing it online. You can go to our website, cookcountyboardofreview.com. When the home page comes up, you're going to see in big purple letters, click here to file your appeal. It'll take you to a portal right away. You must have an email address to file online. If you don't have an email address, then use the paper form. But in any case, it'll take you to a portal. You should finish filling in the information in 2 minutes or less. It's really simple. At the end of the process, it's going to say, would you like to print out your complaint form? I suggest that you say yes. You click yes, and then you continue going on and print out that form, and then you will have a printout, and the form will look pretty much just like the one that we have provided to you. But the great thing about that form is that in the upper right-hand corner, and you can look at your own forms, it'll say complaint number. It'll have a number. That's the number that follows your case from the very beginning of the appeal process to the very end. So if by chance, in some minute circumstance, at some later date, we tell you that we don't have any record of your appeal, you can say, no, wait a second. I've got my printout here. It's got a complaint number. If you give us that complaint number, we're going to be able to find out where we made the mistake, and you'll be able to move forward with your appeal. By the way, if you decide not to print out the complaint form, it's still okay, because what's going to happen is that there will be an email automatically generated to you as soon as you click enter on your filing, and it will confirm that you filed your appeal, and it will also contain the complaint number, which is an important number, and of course you should keep that paperwork for the future. As far as your evidence, we would like you to get it to us as quickly as you can, all right? Try your very best to get to us by November 21st, okay? If you're having a hearing, you don't need to get it to us ahead of time. You can bring your evidence to the hearing. If you ask for a hearing, but then for some reason later on you decide you're not going to go, you can't make it or something, just make sure you get us your evidence by the hearing date, because once we have those hearings, we start circulating the files. The ones that we were holding extra long for the hearings. The ones that didn't ask for a hearing, we start circulating fairly quickly after the due date of November 21st. So I don't have a drop dead date for you. If your evidence comes in after the 21st, we will do our very best to get it into your file. Our challenge is that once we start circulating those files around our office, we have about 60 analysts. Sometimes it can be difficult to locate the file. We have paper files for every appeal, which, by the way, we're working on a project to make that go away by next year. But in any case, for now, we've got paper files. And so sometimes it can be difficult to get the evidence to the file once it's on an analyst's desk. So do your best to get it to us as quickly as you can, November 21st preferably. You can get it to us by delivering it to we have a satellite office at the Skokie Courthouse, which is on Old Orchard Road, about 3 blocks west of the Edens Expressway. Does everyone know where that is? All right, so we have a satellite office there. You could drop off your evidence, or you can mail it to us, and our address is on the handout that we gave you. If you filed online and you already know your complaint number, be sure to include your complaint number on your evidence. That will help us match it up with your file that much more quickly. If you've filed with a paper form, then simply include your name, your address, and your property index number, and we'll get that matched up as well. All right, moving forward, next question is, who's going to review my appeal? Patty mentioned earlier that the Board of Review is governed by 3 elected commissioners, each from a separate geographic district. My district includes about 85 or 90% of suburban Cook County. So it starts way up here at Wilmette, Winnetka, Kenilworth, Glencoe, and it goes west through Northfield and Northbrook and Glenview and Wheeling and Arlington Heights and Palatine and Inverness and Barrington, and drops down to Hanover and includes Schaumburg and Elk Grove and Park Ridge and Des Plaines, and then it goes south. And it goes all the way south down to Lamont and Rich Township, and then it takes a left, it goes east to the border of Indiana. So that's my district. It's about 550 square miles, 1.7 million people live in that district. There are 2 other commissioners. They have geographically smaller districts, but they represent the same number of people. When your appeal comes into the Board of Review, it will be distributed randomly to 1 analyst who works for one of the 3 commissioners. So there's just as good of a chance that your file will go to Commissioner Rogers' staff or Commissioner Cavanaggi's staff as that it will come to someone from my staff. And this is what will happen. Whatever analyst gets your file will review the file, come to a decision, they'll write the decision in the jacket of the file, they'll initial it, then that file will be rotated to an analyst who works for one of the other commissioners. That analyst will do the same thing, then that file will be rotated to the 3rd analyst. They'll analyze the contents of the file as well, come to a decision. In order to get a reduction, 2 of the 3 analysts have to agree that a reduction is warranted. I want to assure you that whatever information you give us, we'll look at. So if you have a handwritten note, we'll read your note. If you give us an appraisal or a Plattus survey, if you cut out a newspaper article, if you have architect's plans or anything else that you've got that you think is evidence that talks about the value of your property, we will look at it. When I first started at the Board of Review in 1999, the assessor didn't have a database. So there were no photographs available. People had to go out and take pictures of their neighbor's home as well as their own home. I can remember an appeal that came to the fellow that was sitting next to me, a guy named Guy Gattone. And he showed it to me and everyone else in our little area because the owner had taken a picture of his own home, but he had his daughter standing right in front of the house, but she was holding a big poster board. And she must have been only about 5 years old. She was real little. And so the poster board came up sort of to her nose. It was this wide. She was holding it like this, and it went down just below her knees. And it said, "Please lower my daddy's taxes." So that was the best one I ever saw. In any case, whatever you give us, we're going to look at. Last question. So let's say you go through this entire process, you file your appeal, you look for evidence, you turn it in, maybe you come for a hearing, maybe you don't, you're waiting at home for that letter, and the letter comes, and either it says no change, which means no reduction, or there's a reduction, but it's not sufficient, in your opinion at least, it's not enough of a reduction. What can you do? Is there a further avenue for appeal? The answer is yes. There are two distinctly different avenues that you can follow. You can choose one or the other. You can go to Circuit Court of Cook County and file an appeal there. If you are not familiar with a courtroom, you may feel the need to hire an attorney. There may also be court costs. And you should know that the Circuit Court of Cook County is backed up about 4 years on their decisions. If you want to use that venue, certainly you're privileged to do so. The other place you can go is a state agency called the Property Tax Appeal Board, PTAB for short. Information about PTAB will be on the letter from the Board of Review informing you of our decision. In order to file at PTAB, you must first have filed at the Board of Review. So don't skip us and just try to go to PTAB. They won't accept your appeal. So file with us first. Whatever happens, then you can subsequently go to PTAB. You also must file your appeal with PTAB within 30 days of the date on the letter that you received from the Board of Review informing you of our decision. Now, PTAB is a severely underfunded state agency. So if you're a commercial or industrial property owner, they are backed up about 4 years on their decisions. If you are a residential property owner, they're backed up about 2 years, which means that if you appeal at PTAB and you eventually prevail in your claim, you will have already paid the taxes on the assessment that you're appealing to them. So what you will do is you will file what's called a certificate of error with the Cook County Assessor's Office, and you will get a refund for the amount you paid over and above the amount you should have paid had you only had the PTAB decision from the very beginning. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, and just remind you, you can get more information by going to our website, Cook County Board of Review, and by going to the Assessor's Office website, cookcountyassessor.com. Thanks a lot for coming. Thank you.